My name is Clifford Mahooty. I am a tribal member of the Zuni Pueblo Indian tribe in New Mexico, and I have been working with the American Indian community for a number of years, both as a professional engineer and also as a member of many established orders within the Indian tribe of where I'm from, especially in the spiritual groups. And I have studied quite extensively among different cultures, as with the American Indian tribes, and also with my academic training in the what we call the white man's world as an engineer. My understanding of what happened with the Pilgrims in 1620 was that they came over here to this country. At that time, the Indians were all over the country, and especially on the eastern coast. There's a whole bunch of different tribes there. And my understanding of that time in history is that the, the people that lived on the indigenous people that lived on the coast there in the eastern side were open to the other peoples that are coming in, primarily because they knew basically of what was going to happen based upon their prophecies, based upon their knowledge of the people that had come before the pilgrims, and so they were aware of what visitors would be. So this, my understanding at that time was that they came over here and met with the Indian people over there, the tribal members over there, and they immediately got to know each other's cultures and had an exchange of ideas, especially on the trade side of it, because they were open to a lot of different types of people, like I said, in the past. So they thought that at that time when the new ones come in there, they were going to be like the ones in the past. Now, the past is not very clear as to who these people were. Some say that they were the Vikings, some people say were the Welsh, and some people even talk about, especially the eastern tribes, talk about other people that are from across the different oceans. Of course, at that time it was the Atlantic where they came through. So from the beginning, the American Indian communities at that time, the different tribal groups, of course, they were pretty well populated, had accepted them as other people that were just as welcome like any other people in that time in history. The history of those tribes over there, that a lot of them are unwritten, and the history of those people that came over here was that when they were the first order of business was about their spirituality and their guiding force, which might be called God, and the religious aspects of what their civilizations were, both sides, and they came to an understanding that we all had, the American Indian people, the indigenous tribes of that area, had also the spiritual paths that they had at that time, and they considered outside people. Of course, in this case, they were white people, and were not of the indigenous groups, but they still maintained that spirituality to accept them because that was just the way that their life was in those days. So when they came over here, they were oppressed by whatever their nations had put on them, and also they were looking for a sort of like a refuge. So they opened their arms to these people and say, "Well, you can come over here and be with us." But at that time, there was no established order as such to say, "Well, you have," because the land was open. There was a food supply was plentiful, and the population was pretty sparse. They had a great country, and they said, "Well, there's that's why I believe that they got along pretty good, because they did not show any aggressiveness They were people that were looking for a place to be with God, according to their teachings. And of course, we had the same thing in our societies here, but we do not call him God. We call him the Creator, or we call him the Keeper of our ways, the light source, or whatever. So they were in harmony. It's my understanding that they were in harmony because that they were both on the same path in the spiritual side. Before then, before 1620, we had the Spanish come in here, in this part of the country here, coming through Mexico, what is now present Mexico. And even prior to that, the other nations, such as the Mayans and the Incas, the Aztecs, and other numerous Indian tribes that were in Mexico and Central America and farther south. These were the same stock, according to our teachings of the Pueblo people and other Indian tribes here, that those were our brothers. But they did so much damage to them because they were just like what they did to the Pilgrims. They opened their arms, and in this case, they had a different agenda. And so this was primarily what we were taught as gold, God, and glory. They were trying to look for gold, and they were looking for to convert the savages at that time into Christianity. And of course, a lot of them were on the glory ego trips that they had developed in their countries. And these are the teachings that you cannot find in any history book, because these are oral history that were passed on to us from our ancestors at that time. So there was actually a meeting of these people with saying that, well, we can work together, and primarily because perhaps of trade, because they used to have a lot of trade. And not only were they familiar with those type of people, but in our teachings, they were also very aware of the Oriental people, what we call the little-eyed people, and and also other tribes or other groups that were not like the Native American Indian tribes here, but they were of a different origin from their countries. And their method of travel in those days was by ocean ships. And there's many histories, books that have been written about these things. So this was occurring all at the same time between about 1580 through the 1600s. So this was pretty well they were in harmony with a lot of, especially with nature, with other tribes, but when others came about, they thought that they were going to be like that. So, but unfortunately, in the Southwest, it did not happen that way. The the cause that created a lot of this chaos later on was probably when a lot of the different nations, like for example England, and before that the French people, when they came to Canada, and they came with the idea that it was a conquering type approach to the resources. And when the indigenous tribes saw this happening, they were sort of conditioned to go against each other. The favorite term of divide and conquer comes into play. And what a lot of these people did was that they deviated, especially the English, deviated from the God concept and the spiritual part of it, to do more of an approach to colonize and take their resources out. And in order to do that, they would create chaos among the groups here, so they start fighting among each other. And so while they're doing that, it's a deviation the usual thing. When they start fighting among each other, then the attention is somewhere else, and so they would have a free play in whatever they wanted to do. The other thing too that I believe what happened according to some of the eastern tribal leaders is that they created a sense of warlike approaches to them, and again deviation from the spirituality and the worship of God complex. And so they go into a that arena of where they did not have that care or the compassion who the people were primarily, and then also the natural resources were so abundant that they could just go and destroy and take whatever they wanted. And later on in life, you saw, we know about what happened to the buffalo. This country has gotten to the point now, presently, right now, of creating a lot of different lies, a lot of different cover ups, and we have not dealt with the truth in so many, at least 2 centuries that I have studied. What needs to happen in this country is to come out and talk about the truth. And what we have established up to this point with the old system that we have, that has to be perhaps be gotten rid of in a way. Uh, we we have the Constitution of the United States that nobody's obeying. Uh, if you really want to look at the Constitution of the United States, that was adopted from the Iroquois Confederacy, and this was not dreamed up by the founding fathers, as they call it. It was an American Indian system that was already in place when they came here, and it worked. But what has happened is that they've deviated from the rules and regulations that they set forth. And in order to make a spiritual connection, to make things operate and working together, there's 2 things that you have to deal with. First of all is that you have to be truthful. In any organization, with any organization, in any application of what the governing bodies, whether it's the United States Congress, whether it's the Supreme Court, or even down to the state levels, they have to go back and re-up their thinking on that. And the other thing too is that this nation has become so fear-based. We are afraid to even talk about our rights. We are afraid to even think about doing something that is for the good of all people and all mankind and all the living things on the planet. And in order to readjust back to that, you have to go back on the spiritual path. In the beginning, if based upon the history that's written, God and science were one and the same. And we're making a full circle right now, but the thing about the science part of it is that they're using it against all mankind. Every day you see on the news today about all the different secret stuff that's going on, all the cover-ups. So in order to get back into a readjustment of the world in general here in America, you have to go back and look at the spiritual part of it, because people are now waking up. And in order to do that, you have to become educated. Education is not going to college, it's not going to a website and get education is to make contact, to teach each other about the basics of what life is supposed to be, of all the resources and the environment that is supposed to sustain all mankind. And also to the most important thing is that we have to keep hurting Mother Earth, because that's our primary source of life. And so this is where a lot of people are looking to the American Indians. As much harm as they did to the American Indian tribes in America, both North and South America, is that they kept their systems in place. Sure, there are remnants of what they used to be, but they had to go back and look at those things in a very comprehensive approach and review and says, how can we help each other out using the concepts that were in place when the outsiders first came here? And it worked, and why don't we go back and looking at these things? We do not need the technology to do what was happening right now. We don't need all the spy equipment. We don't need all the electronic gadgetry to come back, because that is actually a killer in many ways of your concepts of good life. I mean, everybody loves technology. We all love technology, but you have to also parallel it with what is supposed to be good. Technology is a tool. It's not the thing of all things. So that's why we have to look to the American Indian, because they kept all the places intact. Sure, we have probably deviated quite a bit because of we lost some of our tribes lost their languages. Some of our tribes lost their rituals, not because that they did it on purpose, because they were relocated or taken away from their places, especially the eastern seaboard nations like the Cherokee, the Choctaws, and all the other tribes that were herded into Oklahoma. They had those concepts, and they were always in communication with all the brothers and sisters throughout the whole part, all Canada, Mexico, what is now Mexico, what is now Canada, United States, both coasts, and also the island people, like in Puerto Rico and like in Cuba and all those places where there are indigenous groups still in existence today. So that's what you have to look at. You have to go back and seek the information from these people and actually go through a thorough study of that and educate yourself on the concepts. It's a very simple procedure. However, that is not what we are doing or this nation is doing. We have to start now. Instead of thinking about it or saying, well, maybe we'll get around to it. No, you have to, even one person can make the change. Once you start doing that, you make a critical mass, so to speak, in a way. You start getting connected with other people, and you start working the networking part of it. You have to go out there and not do it for profit, not do it because of ego. You have to do it because that you really believe in what needs to happen. There's a lot of people that are out there that nobody listens to them. And the American Indian tribes, especially your leaders, your real leaders, not the ones that put on a bunch of feathers and go out there and say, I am the authority. No. The real leaders are out there in the mountains. The real leaders are out there in their respective homes. And they're still talking like this. And they still have the connection with the spirit. They're the medicine men. They're the tribal elders. They're the story keepers. They're the grandmothers. The other thing too that we have to look at is that in all Indian tribes, the feminine system was the one that kept things in order. I'm very familiar with the southwestern Indian tribes, and they're a matriarchal, matrilineal society. We have accepted the American way of saying that man is the powerful being. No, the feminine part of all societies have been the root of everything. Even you can go clear down to Mother Earth, and that's referred to as a female. So all the different practices, especially in the medicine orders and all the rituals that we go through, is all matrilineal based, matriarchal based. And that's what we have to also accept, because America has become so divided among the different groups, different races, different groups. And so we have to come back to that. You have to cast that aside and say, what can we do for each other? How are we going to fix ourselves? So in order to fix anything else, you have to fix yourself first. And that has to be done with truth, and has to be done with expelling the fear of everything. This country is so logged with so many restrictions and so many laws. And that has a direct effect on the spirit part of the person. And you cannot kill the spirit. You can kill a body, but you cannot kill a spirit. So we have to all come together in that aspect of life and to start helping each other rather than hurting each other. And this is what this country has become. And passing the law, you cannot legislate morality. You cannot make a law and violate it the next morning, like this country has been doing. I mean, every day the laws are broken. And so we have to come back to the truth. And if we have to, and I think that we is to get rid of those old people, old guards or old people that has been there dictating to us. We have to bring in a fresh group of thinkers that are compassionate, that have the spirituality, rather than going into politics because they want to become millionaires. And that's where the mistake is being made.